Hi, this is Paul from InsideTheSun.com. In this video, I wanted to do a quick little rundown of the different locational astrology map lines and how to differentiate between them. Because when you look at a map like this, it could be a little confusing or overwhelming if you don't really know what you're looking at. So I thought I'd do a little quick breakdown of the three types of astrology map lines that you'll see when looking at a map such as this. All right, so here's a map with all the lines. And if you don't know what you're looking at, it can be a bit confusing. So to start, I'm going to remove some of the lines and keep the main ones and kind of explain what those are. So I'm going to remove the local space lines and the Parans. And here we have just the classic astrocartography lines. These are lines that are formed by planets being on the angles. There's four types of these lines. Then they're represented by different letters here. So here's the sun starting on this side with a D. So if you were on this line, that means the sun would be on the descendant for you there. Here we have Neptune with an A. So if you were on this line here, Neptune would be on the ascendant. Chiron with an A, Chiron on the ascendant. Mercury with a D, Mercury on the descendant. Ceres with an A, Ceres on the ascendant. Jupiter, Moon, Mars, Uranus, Pluto, and Saturn. So M is midheaven, and there's also an I, which isn't displayed. That's IC. So basically, these are the main astrocartography lines, and as they are displayed here, all they really are is they represent where planets are on the angles, so where they have a really strong emphasis, and the letter represents which angle it is. A for ascendant, D for descendant, M for midheaven, and I for IC. So when you're looking at these, people often say, well, move to your Jupiter line, for instance, and you'll experience a bunch of success and abundance. It's not always that simple. First of all, there's four different angles that Jupiter could be on. And this one right here, because it's on the map, is the midheaven. So Jupiter on the midheaven, that'd be a good line, but there's more to it than that. Because if you go on one side of the line or the other, you're activating a different house. So, for instance, since this is the midheaven, if you go west of that Jupiter line, you will be in the 10th house. If you go east of that Jupiter line, you will be in the 9th house. So, the 9th house is more about higher learning, philosophy, inspiration, good fortune, higher purpose, that sort of stuff. Whereas the 10th house is more like the work you do in the world. It's it's pressure. It's your duty to perform. It's a spotlight on what you're doing, those sorts of things. So definitely a different flavor of either one. And depending on how your Jupiter is placed in your natal chart, it will also differentiate it further. So depending on what sign it is, if it's a friendly sign or an enemy sign, if it's in its own sign, that'll give you an idea of how much strength it has, not to mention any aspects to that planet. So if there's benefic aspects to it, then it'll be uplifted and it'll have a bit easier time manifesting its positive attributes, whereas if there's difficult aspects to it, it'll be a more difficult time doing so. And then, so that's just looking at the midheaven, the MC line, which is the differentiator between the 9th and the 10th house. The A for ascendant is the differentiator. It's the cusp between the 1st house and the 12th house. So there's a stark difference between that, because the 1st house, which would be here on the western portion of the line, is all about self, your identity, your expression in the world. It's how people see you, those sorts of things. Whereas the 12th house side on the, going east of that line, it could be loss or confinement or isolation. It's things coming to an end. So those are hugely different significations. So if you were to go to I don't know, say you want to go to your Jupiter ascendant line because you want some Jupiter abundance and success in your life. Well, if you move to the 1st house side of your Jupiter line, sure, you might be able to gain lots of those things. But if you move to the 12th house, it's like you might be more of like a happy hermit type vibe where, you know, you're still inspired in certain ways because it's Jupiter, but it's not like you're it's still the 12th house, the house of loss or, you know, things coming to an end. So you got to think about the houses as they relate to the lines on the map when you're looking at these classic astrocartography lines, which are represented by the planets being on the angles. So, like the descendant would be the cusp between the seventh house and the sixth house. So, if you go west of the descendant line, it'll be seventh house significations. If you go east of it, it'll be sixth house significations. Sixth house is problems. It's sitting with issues, health problems, relationship problems. It's like it's selfless service. It's doing work without getting any recognition. It's overwork and underpay. So the sixth house is hard. The seventh house is more about relationships and coming before the public. So it's a little easier in certain ways. So you got to be careful of which side of the lines you go on. And then which one am I missing? I'm missing the IC. The IC isn't on here, but the IC is the cusp between the third house and the fourth house. So if you go west of the IC, then you'll be, the fourth house of home and heart and happiness. Third house side it would be going east of the IC, and that would be, like egoic desires, or just taking initiative and just doing stuff to get stuff done, like those sorts of things. So yeah, so real quick, these lines they're the angles. There's four of them: the ascendant, the descendant, the midheaven, and the IC. Depending on which side of the line you go on will determine which kind of house activations you'll be seeing, because these act as the cusps between certain houses. And you also want to know like how well that planet is doing in your chart based off of sign and aspects too, to know how those energies will manifest in your life specifically. All right, well, and that's just one type of line. We also have those other lines that we're going to look at. So we're going to add some more lines here. And next we'll add the parans. Those are the horizontal latitudinal lines. And these are pretty easy to differentiate because, the angles kind of go vertically and the parans go horizontally. So there's not really any confusion. In fact, the angles are sort of what create the parans, because when they cross, it creates a point where those two energies meet, and it creates a band of energy for those two planets. Like here's one that we can see. It's Uranus on the ascendant, Pluto on the midheaven. At this coordinate come to both on angles at the same time. It creates a paran of Uranus and Pluto all around the globe at that latitude. So some of them that cross on this map and we can see them. Other ones, we see the parans, but we don't see them created on this particular view of the map. They were created somewhere else on the Earth, but they happen to be at this latitude. And what we're doing with these, we're kind of just taking the significations of the two planets and combining them to get a feel for like what those energies do when they come together. Like here's one, Jupiter and Uranus. Like that is like that could be like a lightning rod of good luck, because Jupiter is expansive and fortunate, and it wants things to grow and be harmonious and work out well. And Uranus is excitement and cutting edge, and it likes to test boundaries, and it's like it wants things to happen fast, like a bolt of lightning. So when you combine those two energies, that's sort of like the vibe you would get. You got to be careful though, because it's near other parans and other influences too, so it's not the only thing that'll be in that area, because you can see it's right here next to the Neptune and the nodes. And so if you happen to go toward a paran that you think is great, but there's also other influences there as well, like Neptune and the nodes, this could be like overwhelming emotion, like extremes, ups and downs, as far as like things not making sense, and why is this happening to me, like those sorts of things. So like all else being equal, just happen to see these two parans coming together, that seems like a pretty intense line overall. But, this is how you would want to start seeing the Parans. You want to think about like the significations of the planets and what would happen if they were to come together. Like Mercury Ceres is a fun one. It's, you know, you film, you would have more fun, like make more friends, good luck and like support in, business and career. Feel like you're able to communicate better. So like, because, Ceres is supportive and Mercury is social. So you kind of just combine the significations of the two planets and get a feel for what they would provide on the map. So we're going to add another line here next, and that would be local space lines. And since we now understand the other lines that we saw, the angular lines and the parans, we could kind of make sense of like what the local space lines are in addition to those. But actually, I'm going to take off the other lines and leave just the local space lines so we could see them a little more clearly here. Okay, so local space lines look like this. And you could tell them if you're kind of confused on which line it is, if it has a lowercase d, it's a local space line. I believe that means it's, for the direction, because it's the direction of the planet is what these represent. So in this example, the birth chart is for here in Las Vegas, Nevada. And at this time, if you were to take a snapshot of all the planets in the sky and you were to like follow that direction, that's what these represent. So like if I'm going up here north through Nevada into Oregon into Washington, I'd be following the Jupiter. You'd be following Jupiter in the sky, like the actual direction of it in the sky relative to this place of origin. And if you went this way, you'd be following Uranus up here through Wyoming, South Dakota, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. So go to Minneapolis and you're following Uranus in the sky. And every single planet is represented here. You'll notice that they sort of go in opposition to each other, or the line spans in both directions. That's because it sort of creates the effect where, if you're following the planet, so say, the planet can most be accurately be represented like over here somewhere. Well, if you follow that planet and you keep following that exact direction all the way around the globe, you'll eventually reach back around to the other side to the place of origin. So local space lines act as almost like a ribbon wrapping around the Earth in the direction of the planet, starting from the point of the birthplace. So you can go in either direction and you'd still be activating that planetary energy, emphasizing it. You'd be strengthening how it is in your chart. So these lines have a lot to do with how the planet is doing in your natal chart, because if you're activating it, if you're emphasizing it, then you're emphasizing how it's doing in your natal chart. So if it's like, in a great sign, in a great house, aspected by a benefic, and you want to emphasize that planet, by all means, go for it. I mean, even a strong Saturn emphasized would be good, because it's like, hard work and dedication becomes more natural for you, or like you'd have good fortune in real estate, like those sorts of things. But if you have like a weak Venus, even though Venus is a benefic, if you have a weak Venus and you're following your Venus local space line, then you're just emphasizing, some of the relationship troubles you might have experienced to a higher degree, because Venus is relationships. So these local space lines definitely want to consider the strength of the planet in your natal chart when you are following them, compared to like the parans, where it's more of like the natural significations of the planets coming together. And the angle lines, you also like want to consider the strength of those planets, but those are more like you want to understand the strength of the sign and the aspects. But if you're moving to an angle, you are kind of shifting the house from your natal chart to the the relocation chart. So yeah, but all in all, it's a good idea to know the strength of your planets from your natal chart beforehand, just so you understand what the energies are that are being activated in these regards. So now I will put all the lines back on the map. And so here they are, the angle lines, the parans, horizontal lines, and the local space lines all on one map. So here they all are all back together, but hopefully they make a little more sense on 3 different types of lines that you'll see and how we kind of look at them apart from one another. So just wanted to do a quick breakdown on that. Hopefully it helps. Other videos and on my website, I go into a lot more detail on understanding, what they are and how they manifest, because there's a, practically infinite number of scenarios that we could look at. But the first step is always to understand what we're looking at. So thank you very much, and thanks for watching.